talk to a man who typically makes news from the bench in robes, but more recently he created headlines with this appearance at the Islamic Society of Boston Cultural Center.
I asked to speak with you here today because I know that this is a difficult time for persons who practice the Islamic faith in this country. And I am here to assure you that you do not stand alone. You have a constitution and laws to protect your right to practice your religion, to protect you from discrimination and the denial of your equal rights, and to protect you from acts of violence that may be committed against you because of your religion or your nation of origin.
That was the voice of Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court Chief Justice Ralph Gants, who joins me now. It's a pleasure to meet you.
It's great to be here.
10 days, that happened 10 days after Donald Trump said no Muslims in the country, and then a choir joined him. Did you go there in response to this growing clamor? Why'd you go?
One night I was listening to all that was going on, and I said, I need to go. I need to go speak to Muslims and make sure that they understand that they have a constitution to protect them. It was not really in response to any single statement, but I do live here, I do hear what is going on, and I did sense that it was important that somebody speak, and the question is, if not me, whom? I am the person who is, for better or for worse, the person who is the spokesperson for our Constitution, so I thought I should go.
So let's talk about one of your crusades. Can I call it a crusade? Well, you don't even know what I'm talking about yet. But if my understanding is a majority of people who walk through a legal services office door saying, I have a housing problem, a family court problem, I need free representation because I'm indigent, a majority of them can't get a lawyer for funding reasons. You've been lobbying, I know I'm not supposed to say lobby, you've been advocating on Beacon Hill for what to try to solve the problem, Chief Justice?
We're trying to get a $27 million budget for MLAC, which is Massachusetts Legal Assistance Corporation. You are right, about 2 out of 3 persons who qualify for legal aid are turned away because there simply are not enough legal services attorneys to represent them. That means that they are appearing themselves in court and trying to deal with problems of eviction, problems of domestic violence on their own.
I was a tenant lawyer in the South Bronx, and I can't tell you how many people told me I'd rather go to jail than be evicted from my house. And the reason I say that is, you know better than most, a half century ago, the Supreme Court of the United States decided that if you're charged with a serious crime and you're indigent and you ask the court to provide a lawyer for nothing, the Gideon case, you get one. Why shouldn't there be a Gideon case for civil legal services? You're about to lose a kid. You may lose the only place you have to live. Why is that a less serious liberty issue than being thrown in the can?
Right now, constitutionally, it's only matters of liberty which entitle you to an attorney. We've not yet had a case in which somebody has claimed that an eviction from their home is a type of loss of liberty which should trigger their receipt of legal services. So we'll wait to see if there is a case before we declare there to be a constitutional right to do so. Realistically, it would be more likely to be a legislative entitlement than a constitutional right.
Well, let me read to you from Gideon. I know you can't speak about future cases, but I'm doing my best to try to get what I can.
I understand.
The noble idea of fair trials in which every defendant stands equal before the law cannot be realized, the Supreme Court wrote in the Gideon case, if the poor man charged with crime has to face his accusers without a lawyer to assist him. That is essentially what the poor man or woman is being faced with in those civil cases we described, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, we are aiming for what we call 100% access, and that is a recognition that in terms of the way the political world looks right now, we're not likely to get the funds to provide everybody with counsel. So we are trying to essentially triage these individuals, identify those who can probably help themselves and provide better services so that they can know the law and protect their rights. We're trying to help those who really need counsel to be able to afford counsel, and we're trying to identify those who may need a limited bit of help, a lawyer for the day, to have pro bono help. So right now we're trying to do the best we can with the quite limited resources we have.
You wrote an op-ed saying we should expand the housing court. What did you say? Roughly 2/3 of the state have courts with judges that have expertise in housing. Why does that matter? Why is I mean, I used to practice in one, I think the first in the country in the South Bronx. Why doesn't a court of general jurisdiction serve the same purpose?
Because a court of general jurisdiction, a district court, Court or the Boston Municipal Court would not have the housing specialists which would enable you to mediate your housing dispute and hopefully find a better result for the landlord and for the tenant than eviction. It would not have the tenancy preservation program, which assists those with disabilities to avoid homelessness. It would not be able to provide the receiverships that allow demolished three-deckers to be renovated into providing decent housing. A district court and Boston Municipal Court are really focused on criminal laws, matters of domestic violence. They just don't have the time or the resources to be able to do what a housing court can do.
Let's move to the criminal side for a minute. You got into a bit of a thing. Well, I don't know if you got into it, but there was a bit of a controversy. You are not crazy about mandatory minimum sentences. You want judges to have more discretion. You'll tell me why in a second. The response, and this is not verbatim, the Suffolk County DA was, this is not a progressive policy the Chief Justice is advocating. He's advocating a failed policy from 30 years ago. Why are you right? Why is he wrong?
The fact of the matter is, we need for judges to be able to sentence persons in accordance with the nature of the crime and their role in the crime. And mandatory minimums simply don't do that. There are three things we really need to do on the criminal sentencing side. One is we need to make sure that the punishment is appropriate to the crime. We also need to make sure that the punishment provides the best chance for that individual to not recidivate, to not come back and commit new crimes. And we also need to reduce the overall rate of incarceration and save the money we're spending on incarceration and devote it really to probation supervision and improve the ability of individuals to get past the past.
Is race part of your consideration, the disproportionate impact of some of these sentences on people of color, or is that not part of the deal?
It certainly is part of the concern, and the fact of the matter is, for whatever reason, those who are persons of color are more likely to face a mandatory minimum than those who are not. We are in the court system very mindful of issues of race. We had a court conference a number of months ago focused on the issue of implicit bias. We are looking very hard at issues of fairness and issues of race in our court system.
Let's stay on the criminal side for a minute. You know, and I don't know how far what you can say here, but it's an important issue. I want you to listen to a mother whose daughter was raped and killed, commenting on the sentencing that the convicted killer got for doing this to her daughter. Here's Peggy Ritzer.
We are devastated and feel betrayed with Judge Lowy's inability to give 3 consecutive life sentences without the eligibility of parole. We recognize that Judge David Lowy was faced with a difficult decision, one that was unfairly restricted by the imprudent actions of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court that decided juveniles who deliberately commit heinous crimes cannot be sentenced to life without parole. Colleen's family, friends, students, and those who admired her have been given a life sentence without parole, but not the individual who committed the heinous act. This is wrong and unjust.
And obviously the killer and rapist in that case is Philip Chisholm. Correct me if I'm wrong. Supreme Court came down with a decision that says it's unconstitutional for there to be mandatory life sentences without parole for juvenile murderers. But the SJC went even further, saying that even within the discretion of a judge, he or she cannot sentence someone to life without the possibility of parole. So at least legally, her factual recitation was correct. When you hear something like that, what's your reaction, both as a Chief Justice and as a father, as a human being?
Well, certainly as a father, I certainly understand that if it had happened to my child, I would feel exactly as she did. But my role with regard to the court is not so much to be thinking as a father, but to be thinking as a judge. And what we did, and what the U.S. Supreme Court essentially said, is that the mind of a juvenile is not so well developed that we can ensure that that person is without hope. The U.S. Supreme Court said that a court should evaluate whether that person has any possibility of redeeming himself at the time of sentencing. What we essentially said is that you can't know that when a kid is 17 or 18 years old. Better for that to be done by a parole board when that person is 40 or 50 years old to see if there is any chance of redemption.
We talk about your colleagues. You're about to be lonely, potentially, up there at the old SJC. My understanding is Charlie Baker, based upon retirements announced so far and automatic outs based upon 7 years old, there are going to be 5 new members of the state's highest court. appoint a minimum during his term. Is that correct?
Within the next 2 years, he
Five.
will have 5 appointments.
So he's appointed an advisory group, and I know ultimately the governor's council, I don't even want to get into that, but the governor's council makes the decision here. Does he talk to you? Are you involved in any way in this? I know you have no formal role.
Right. Certainly the choice will be his.
Yeah.
I have met with his commission, and I have met with him.
Oh, you have?
We spoke for about an hour as to what it means to be on my court. I am fully confident that he is committed to putting quality people into my court and to doing it the right way.
Did he ask you for names or float names by you?
He did not ask me for names, but he did ask me to help him to understand what it means to be on the court and what the nature of the job is.
Don't you think we should wait till the next governor's elected until we fill the seats on the SJC?
I think it may be best for this to be done now. So
What do you think about
I wouldn't
that?
even have a quorum if he does that. So
What do you think about this endless, this horrible, I would say, logjam over filling Antonin Scalia's seat?
I mean,
Chief Justice?
it certainly is troubling with the paralysis that already is in Washington to imagine that there could be paralysis for yet a third branch for what is going to be more than a year, because when the new president takes office on January 20th, that president is not likely to be having a new justice to be named at that point. So we're talking about a year and a half without a ninth justice in a court that so often is split 4-4.
So your view is nominate, hearing, and vote?
I think certainly they should at least hear who the president is going to name before they decide whether that person is fit to be the ninth justice.
Chief Justice Gants, it's really a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.